Okay, hello and welcome to the Planning and Transport Policy Subcommittee on the 8th of October 2024. I am Councillor Richard Wilkins, and we have Councillor Bill Revans, Councillor Sarah Wakefield in the room. And today's meeting will be run using the OWL webcasting system, and there will be key officers physically present in the room. Other elected members and officers may physically or remotely join the meeting to speak on specific agenda items or observe. This meeting is being webcast using the OWL, and therefore other members of the public and partners can observe the meeting remotely. The agenda pack with papers is available on ModGov or directly from the council website. The link that was sent out to members. When you're invited to speak, could you clearly state who you are for the benefit of anybody who's listening to the meeting so they can identify who's speaking. Just like to advise everyone present at this meeting is audio recorded. Finally, as the agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to the page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all present in finding the appropriate information. Okay, to start off with, apologies for absences. I'm just going to invite Josh to give any apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Graham Hicks and Councillor Sarah Whitfield is substituting, and we have apologies from Councillor Mike Rigby, so Councillor yourself, Richard Wilkins is Chair.
Thank you. Okay.
Just to note, I think Councillor Rigby is online, so his presence is looming in the room.
Perfect. Okay, minutes from the previous meeting. Is there anybody want to make any alterations to the minutes? No, I believe that only myself and Councillor Revans were present, so I'll ask Councillor Revans to.
Yeah, I've read the minutes, very happy to propose that these are a true and accurate record.
I will second them as I was in the room, so everybody happy? Yeah. Okay, so declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Beyond the usual mentioned? No. Okay. So public questions. There were no questions received. So we'll move straight on to section 5, which is still spending priorities, and I'm going to invite Joe Wilkins. Just for anybody listening, no relation to myself, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'd actually like to first of all pass over to my colleague Joe Humble, who's just going to give the committee a presentation relating to viability, and then I'll follow on after Joe. Yeah. We'll try and share the screen for the report.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. So my name is Joe Humble. I oversee the affordable housing delivery service across Somerset County, and also have been involved in viability assessments across a range of sites that are currently in operation and under determination. I just want to talk to you a little bit. It's a very quick presentation just to bring everybody up to speed about where we are on viability and the types of considerations that we have to give. Viability is governed through the National Planning Policy Framework, and we have planning policy guidance, which forms the decisions and the assumptions that we have to make when looking at viability assumptions. There's also a whole raft of information about how the local plan should take into consideration viability. But today I'm just going to show you a demonstration of the information that's held within the viability reports when we're looking at them, when they come in for under determination through the planning process. This is a viability pie. These are all the things that we have to consider when we're looking at viability. When we're talking about schemes, we're talking about what's the maximum value, what is the income that comes from a scheme. It's primarily from the open market housing values and the affordable home sales values. That is the income that developers will receive. Of course, you can't build houses or residential developments or employment unless you have land. So there has to be land availability, and that comes at a cost too. When we're looking at how much it costs to build the site, we've got the build costs. We've got the site-specific infrastructure costs. Does it need a new roundabout? What other open space contributions do we require? Well, abnormal. So is there anything abnormal in the site? Is there anything topography? Is it on a slope? Have we got to do extra piling? What extra costs are there? I think you're all fully versed in nutrient neutrality. That is an additional cost to the development. And the most recent one is the biodiversity net gain. Now, hopefully some of those costs will be mitigated through design engineering and thoughtful thinking ahead in the process. However, there is often a cost associated with that. Costs aren't known on some of these yet. They're still working their way through the development process. Professional fees. Every time you hear about a structural engineer report, an architecture report, a planning agent, all those costs of all those professionals go into the development. Marketing costs. The houses don't sell themselves. So you do need the sales office, you need the marketing suite, you need to get the purchasers in, generate the value of development. The finances. There's two sides to finances. There's development finance, and there's also the mortgages of who's going to buy those properties. The developer's finance particularly looks at the level of borrowing, as does those that want to purchase properties. Interest rates are key, and cash flow is very key to development. If you take the affordable housing and that's provided up front, that provides a cash influx into the scheme before some of these costs start coming out. You build in a contingency, because until you start getting in on site, there's often unexpected costs. So there's always a contingency built in. We're going to hear a little bit more from Joe about the community infrastructure levy. That is applied in former South Somerset, former Sedgemoor, and former Taunton Deane areas. Former Mendip and former West Somerset areas do not have still, but all the areas have some regulatory planning obligations as well. That's usually secured through a Section 106 planning agreement. That's in education asks, the transport, my area, the affordable housing, play provision, open space, health. All of these are asks for the scheme. And there is a developer return. At the beginning of the presentation, I said that we were guided by the planning policies, the national planning policies, and that does allow for developer return between 15 and 20%. As much as we may not wish to see it, that is what the policy says. There's also other influences. What's happening with the change in the housing market? What's happening in the financial markets? Government policy changes, future home standards, funding programs. So we know what happens with the mortgage markets. They can change very rapidly. Financial markets, if you've got financial instability, the developers do stop. We've seen rent reduction programs being announced. That is the time where development programs are paused and people really look at how they're going to fund their developments, what their future programs look like. Between us all, we want to develop those happy communities. We have to take into consideration all these points. So in broad summary, it's the development value, which is the value of the properties, against the costs, which I've just explained, gives you a residual value. And if that residual value, so in other words, the costs outweigh the actual value, then the scheme is deemed not viable. Planning obligations is quite a weight in this asks. And the seal regulations, again, Joe will come on to this in more detail, but I think it's worth remembering that the obligations we're asking for have got to be necessary to make the development acceptable, and they've got to be related to the development. So please keep that in the back of your minds. In my area, you can see here, I think some of you may be familiar with this slide. The demand is way outstripping. So we've got 10,000 people, probably about 11,000 on the waiting list now. But last year, in 2023, we developed the number of letting properties was 1,974. So you can see there's a significant discord. And through the viability assessments that we're working on just on strategic sites, there's a potential to lose about 1,000 affordable homes. There's also viability assessments on the smaller sites. We might lose 1 or 2 affordable homes, but every home counts. So far this year, we've lost certainly 50 through a viability challenge. But it's all part of that plan balance, because actually those schemes are giving other benefits to the council as well, and to the local communities, and so it is part of that planning officer planning balance, which Simon will explain more detail shortly. And I think it's fair to say that actually we do have some 100% affordable housing schemes moving forward. We have Homes England funding. But that comes with complexities too, and it also has an impact on SIL, which is still social housing relief. And please bear in mind, the Homes England funding has only got a short period of time. We're waiting for the budget to hear what potentially the next funding programme is, but the current one will expire in 2028. So what we're here today is really just to share with you is any other ideas on how we can sort of square our requests. We've got to look at our design engineering. Every time someone asks for something on a scheme, whether it's an extra footpath, whether it's an extra affordable home, it has an impact. We need to think really smartly about what our designs are, because we do want to still design high quality, well thought out places for people to live. We need to look at the infrastructure funding support that might be available from central government or other sources. The data, the viability data accuracy, we have them independently assessed when they come in, but as officers, we also look at them in detail to provide that local knowledge and expertise. And then we need that internal prioritisation. What should give? So if the scheme doesn't stack up, what do we look at on a scheme by scheme basis? What is that prioritisation? Which again is what brings us here today. Thank you. Hopefully that was useful. Always happy to talk viability or affordable housing as appropriate. I'm going to hand you over to Joe now, who's going to talk you through the SIL aspects. Thank you.
Can we just pause at this point? Probably a couple of questions for yourself. So I'm going to go straight to Sarah Wakefield. She don't need to press.
I just wanted to ask on the viability, and I understand obviously that sometimes it's not viable to build because there's too many costs. But what I wanted to know is if I think it's right that the developer is allowed a certain percentage profit in his viability argument, and I just think you want to tell us what that is. And I also think that it should be made clear to people listening that there are people out there, online people out there, and other companies whose whole idea is to help developers claim viability and get rid of their affordable housing. It's a much bigger industry than people realise, and it makes it even harder for local authorities to press on with what they want to do. And I just think it should be noticed, you know, it's not just the developer saying, oh, I'm not going to make enough profit. It's a whole industry of people trying to make sure they don't have to build the affordable housing. And in my view, and I'm saying this publicly, the government needs to attack this because it's not working for us, because we are losing affordable houses all over the country because of this. So I just wanted to ask about the percentage profits.
Before you answer that, could I just add, it's my understanding that as Sarah says, that the profits are ring-fenced pretty much on viability. However, so a developer can claim viability if their profits are harmed. However, if their profits are in extreme, are more than the liability, the usual things, we don't get any extra, as a council, back off the developer. So just wondering if we could answer those two questions.
Yeah, I can address the developer profit. And I think that's going to be in the context of that viability pie, because developer profit is only one element of all those other costs, which are very significant, which you'll hear about in a minute, against the schemes. And it's very much a scheme-specific conversation. The PPG allows for developers to have recognises between 15 and 20% profit. Part of our work as officers and part of the work of the independent viability assessor is to look and see whether that is fair and reasonable, what percentage profit developer returns. So it's developer return rather than profit. Developer return is appropriate to that scheme. They also look at what is the appropriate land value, the benchmark land value. And then they look at all the other costs that I've just run through in that viability pie. So developer return is one aspect, and it's more about what is going into the scheme against the value of the properties or the income that's being generated from that scheme. There is that balancing, that's that weighing scales that I just showed you on the screen.
Thank you. Move on to Chair. We've got a few technical gremlins in the room. I think it started early. So just.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jo Wilfies and I'm a Principal Planning Policy Officer operating primarily in Area South. The purpose of the report today is to seek confirmation of the previously agreed SIL commitments to allocate £500,000 of SIL money that's already in the pot forward funding infrastructure to support the upmount and sustainable urban extension, with agreement for the forward funding delegated to the Chief Planning Officer in consultation with the Head of Legal Services. The money will be recovered via the Section 106 agreement if the Planning Permission is granted when the scheme goes to committee later this month. As Joe's already mentioned, there are 3 charging areas within the Somerset Council area, the Sedgemoor, Taunton, Deane, South Somerset areas, with no SIL in the former Mendip and West Somerset areas. It's important to note that SIL monies can only be spent in the area they are collected in. Areas that do not have SIL collect contributions through Section 106 agreements only, whereas in the SIL charging areas, both means of securing obligations are used. Unlike when it was originally introduced, SIL and Section 106 monies can now be pooled to go towards a single infrastructure project. Section 106 contributions are more specific than SIL and relate to the planning application in particular. They must meet the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework, and these are necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, directly related to the development, and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind. Now I'm going to look at a bit more detail at each of the SIL charging areas. So in former Area South, when it was originally introduced, it was £40 per square metre for residential development, except for in the Charleyston development area and the only sustainable urban extensions, where for viability reasons, there's no SIL charging. That with indexing is now risen to just over £50 per square metre. There's also a charge for out of centre retail development of £100 per square metre. And again, with the indexing, that's now risen to just over £135 per square metre. So looking at the SIL monies that have been collected so far, the balance at 31st of March 2024 was just over £3 million. 5% of the SIL monies collected go towards administration costs. And then also there's a proportion that goes to town and parish councils. They receive 15% of SIL receipts up to a maximum of £100 per council tax dwelling per annum. And this rises to 25% where a neighbourhood plan is in place. And that's known as the meaningful proportion. So with the, once those sums have been taken out, there's a balance of just over £2 million. Most of that has now been spent on projects such as the Yeovil Refresh Triangle project and Charge Leisure Centre public access project, and also some Wyndham Street public realm improvements. So that does leave a balance currently in the pot £505,000. And so I'm going to just hand over to Simon, who's now going to talk to you a bit about the Up Ludford scheme.
Thank you, Joe. Morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Simon Fox, and I work in the development management team as a major project officer, mostly dealing with residential schemes in Taunton and Yeovil. The scheme I wish to talk to you about today is in Yeovil. It's called Up Ludford and forms one of the two sustainable urban extensions allocated in the local plan. This is detailed in Appendix B to your report pack today, and poses a way forward to forward fund infrastructure related to the Up Ludford scheme. Now, the Up Ludford scheme is currently going through the planning process and is being reported to Area South Planning Committee at the end of October, in a few weeks' time. And in the past few months, we've been undertaking a viability exercise for this scheme and refreshing it from one that was done before 2019. And one of the things that we have identified, and I think has been fairly common knowledge on most viability exercises that we've done, is that where a scheme can afford something, and as Joan has set out in her slides, there are many circumstances where sites can't afford things, but when they can afford them, it then becomes a question of when they can afford them. So we work on the basis that the developer would typically put some money up front to open up the site, prepare the site for development at their cost, and then would start using receipts from house sales to fund the infrastructure moving forward, including the Sector 106 package and, of course, any SILs liable on the scheme. What this means is that when you're dealing with a viability exercise, and you're trying to work out when certain bits of infrastructure can be funded, the question you're really asking the developer is, or question you're asking is, can you afford it and when can you afford it? And the answer to the latter question is typically not at the start. And this runs into a tension, typically, almost always the case in static planning committee when the planning committee members of the public, parish councillors, everyone, and consultees all want things early. They want things effectively constructed before the first house is built. So all the roads, all the active travel, the school places, the doctor's surgery, the local centre, everything you can think of that we seek via these mechanisms. And that just isn't possible. That we also now have the additional upfront cost of phosphate mitigation, which requires the developer to spend more money upfront than they would wish to. So the combination of all of this is that officers presenting reports to committee are often now doing so with much more detailed heads of terms than have ever been the case before. And this gets to the point of actually detailing the trigger point for the payment of monies or the delivery of a piece of infrastructure. And what that is demonstrating now is that some of those elements are not coming forward as soon as we would like them. And so trying to square the impossible circle, if you like, one idea that we have thought about is using still to forward fund some of those elements. So if there is a trigger at, say, 100 homes that ideally we would like upon commencement or on first occupation, then the use of still as a temporary forward funding facility would allow us to bring that element forward, construct it when we want it, and then allow the trigger in the 106, say the 100 occupation trigger, to replenish the pot. And this idea of a rolling fund would then mean you could then use that money to bring the next trigger that is not as ideal as you'd like it forward a bit. And what this means is that typically, and in the case of Mudford, key active travel and connectivity pieces of infrastructure could be brought forward compared to where the proposed trigger points are going to be. Ultimately, we still end up with the pot at the end of it, when all those triggers have been exhausted. And the idea then would be you could roll on to the next site and do similar. As I said, this is one of 2 sites in Yeovil under the Sustainable Urban Extension banner. The other one in Keyford is likely to be presented to committee early next year, and that will run into the same issues. And therefore, using SIL in a proactive way to bring forward infrastructure when we all ideally want it, but the development economics do not allow it, is effectively the premise of the ask in allocating this money today. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move to some questions. I think the concern with the way forward you're describing, although very desirable, is the triggers when they do return the money to the pot. So can I ask how you envisage the developers being able to replenish the pot in good time and without going through perhaps a backtracking area, if you like, on payment?
Well, you have to take these things at face value, i.e. if there is a Section 06 obligation to pay a sum of money by a certain number of occupations, then you have to assume that that will be done. Of course, with development, you are potentially tying up this money for a period. So even if you're bringing things forward 100 occupations sooner than the trigger, that could be 2 years in time. And therefore, we're not hiding behind the fact that this is a quick sort of a loan, not a loan, a quick repayment. It's not that. But as an officer, I've been sat in that seat many, many times with members saying, why aren't we getting these things as early as we would like them? And this is one way, using our own money that we have sort of sat in a pot, to use it for proactive reasons. Of course, the other side of looking at it is if the money isn't granted today, then at least I can sit at the front of a room like this and in a planning item and say that every reasonable attempt has been made to bring that item forward, but the money wasn't available from our SIL pot. I've also reached out to other colleagues in highways to see if there are other active travel pots that can be used in a similar way, and we're waiting to hear back as to whether that's possible. But we have to try and look at things differently if we want to try and bring forward the things that we want. If we want to bring forward active travel, for example, to embed, sustainable travel behaviours, then we need those bits of infrastructure in early, so that the early inhabitants can develop those behaviours rather than needing to rely on a car for 4 years because of the trigger that we can afford rather than the trigger that we want.
So thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentations. I've got some interesting experiences of urban extension in the Bridgewater area. So I represent the villages of Stockmore and Wilstock, which are indeed similar urban extensions, perhaps to what we're looking at here. And the apocryphal story, of course, was every first-time resident of Stockmore and Wilstock, the house purchasers or first tenants of each house, were given a bus pass so that they could use public transport. You can only imagine the flaw in that process was that there were no buses on which they could use them. And so for the subsequent second and third occupants, and there is 15 years later, there is still no bus route. And the bus companies tell me how to buy them. There was also a bus gate, but the roads were too narrow for the bus companies to get the bus through. So I welcome this improved approach to planning. What we have seen as well is an attempt previously to put trigger points in place for stages and phases of the development to bring forward some of the community infrastructure, like the community hall at Wilstock or the play area and Wilstock School. The developers, unfortunately, have ignored those trigger points, and they've gone on to first occupation in spite of what the conditions on planning have said. And we've argued that case at planning committee with officers, and unfortunately, it's proceeded on a pragmatic view. And that's my concern around this is that do we have the will and the resource to enforce and follow up on the trigger points that we're looking for in this process. So yes, in theory, I think this will work. My learned experience is we just have to be very cautious about developers exploiting our good nature and our resource position.
Yeah, I'll go to Sarah before.
Excuse me. Quite a lot of what Bill just said. To me, this is using the council as a bank, basically. They're saying we can't borrow the money easily from a bank to do this, so let's use the council as a bank. Will we charge interest on the money? I mean, they'd have to pay interest on the bank to a bank. There is a risk, exactly as Bill has outlined, that they don't build. They build 99 houses and then stop, go somewhere else. Developers are really, really good, as you all know, at getting around obligations. They're really good at it. We have done the same thing already once, haven't we? We've given that money to build the road in Wellington to go to the station. I don't know whether it's being built. The station's now at risk. So I don't know whether that's happening or not. I don't know whether, I can't remember if it was still money or not. It was. We gave them some money maybe to do that in advance because they weren't otherwise going to build the road up to the station.
We said in principle that we would do that. The application for the road is, and Simon is actually dealing with that application, has only just come in.
Right.
So we're not in that position yet, and I think circumstances will change anyway, obviously.
So my questions are, is this being done elsewhere? Are other councils using SIL money to forward fund infrastructure? I mean, that's something I need to know because, we can learn from experience about whether they get it back if they're already doing it. Secondly, and I think the answer is yes, would Homes England, if we had Homes England money, would they let us spend it in this way? I mean, we need to do something interesting and useful and helpful, but I don't think we need to lead the charge in the market to do something that isn't the right thing to do. I am worried about the interest. I think, quite frankly, if they don't build 100 houses by whenever we thought they were going to, they should start paying interest on the we need something to fall back on, and we need to have teeth, because otherwise they will get away.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll go on to the rest of the presentation. So, yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair. So just to continue, just looking at the former Sedgemoor area charging rates, they charge for hotel development at £10 per square metre, which has now gone up to 15 with the indexing. Supermarkets and retail warehouses, they've started off at £100 per square metre and is now 150. Residential development at Bridgewater and Burnham and Highbridge was £40 and has now gone up to 60 per square metre. and all other residential development is now at £120 per square metre. In terms of the money that's been collected so far, it's in excess of £13 million. As with all areas, you have your 5% admin charge plus your meaningful proportion. £222,000 of money has been spent, and 20% of the seal receipts are now ring fenced for the Bridgewater tidal barrier, and that I believe was agreed by executive this earlier this year. So there is in last pot a balance of in excess of £8 million, but it is anticipated that that money will be required for education contributions in Puriton and South Bridgewater, although I understand that they will obviously have to be discussed with education colleagues as to its exact priorities of where that will be going. So moving on to the former Taunton Dean charging areas, I'm going to hand over to Kate, who will just talk you through those areas.
Thanks, Jane. So in the former Somerset Western Taunton area, it's only in the former Taunton Dean Borough Council area that we charge community infrastructure levy. And these are the rates you see before you now. When we introduced the levy back in 2014, and the rates in the second column explain what they currently are with index linking. So we collect residential developments in Taunton, but excluding the town centre area. Residential development outside the settlement limits of Taunton and Wellington, so we don't collect SIL in Wellington due to viability purposes when SIL was introduced, and retail development outside of those town centres. Next slide, please, Jane. Thanks. So this shows what we've collected to date, and as Jane's explained, the element that's put aside to help the administration of SIL, payments that have gone out to town and parish councils where they are eligible for between 15 and 25%, and then what's left in terms of the strategic fund, what is spent, what's been spent to date, and what we've got in terms of commitments to infrastructure programmes going forward. This table just briefly outlines where those commitments are. So we've made an allocation to support cycle and pedestrian improvements in Taunton Town Centre. That was match funding to support the High Street, future High Street funding that we were awarded by government. The allocation in the later year 27-28 is there to support anticipating active travel funding streams that might come forward from government, because you often need to set aside match funding when you're putting in funding bids. There is funding for Town Centre regeneration. Again, this is match funding that supported future high street funds and is supporting a lot of the interventions in the town centre for improvements to pedestrian and active travel measures. There's a large allocation of 5.7 million to support some of the flood works in the town centre, and those projects are moving forward and will anticipate having a planning application for the raising of the ward along the River Terry later this year. We've got an allocation for community facilities to support the provision of the community facilities at the Orchard Grove development in South West Taunton. And then the 5 million that is provisionally allocated to forward for the early delivery of the access road to the station in the event that is required. But thanks, Jane. Move to the next slide. So this just breaks down what we've collected to date, what we've spent to date. So there was funding made for the Taunton station improvements to improve some of the public realm materials at the entrance to the station.
Some of the SIL funding has gone into supporting the public realm improvements around Coal Orchard developments, near the theatre. We've made allocation to support the purchase of land in Wellington to improve public open space provision, and Wellington Town Council are moving that project forward now. And there's been 7 million allocated to the delivery of the Orchard Road Primary School, which is open this year. So that's the balance of what's been allocated or spent today rather than allocated. Thanks, Jane. So just to conclude, Government Commission research has shown that SIL has not been raising as much money towards infrastructure as originally expected, with developers preferring Section 106 agreements for large mixed-use sites. The previous government proposed to introduce the new infrastructure levy through the Levelling Up Bill. However, the current government has stated that it does not intend to take that forward. So we will have to see what will happen in the future. And just to let you know that each year the council publishes an infrastructure funding statement, which sets out all this expenditure in a lot more detail. So, and then to conclude, you're reminded of the recommendations in the report for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. It is interesting. Before I go to people in the room and then online, I think there is concern in the room over clawback with the in particular the Mudford upland scheme. Now, my understanding is that is that the clawback will happen in one fell swoop. Is that right? Or will it be staged?
It has to be staged because the trigger points are staged. I mean, the finer detail actually has to be worked through as to how the mechanism with the developer would work. Indeed, whether the developer would even want to entertain us interfering by forward funding elements. What we're trying to do is at least enter that conversation with the basis that we've got some money to invest in bringing forward infrastructure. As far as the developers are concerned, they've set out their viability appraisal, they've set out when they can afford to spend certain elements, and that will be reflected in the officer's recommendation and the Section 06 heads of terms. The terms on which money would be used or given or however it is used is still to be determined. So is the T's and C's with regard to interest. But given this comes effectively from a council position of wanting to see things earlier than they can be afforded, what we don't want to do is be more expensive than a bank or be so expensive that the developer again thinks, well, actually, I've got an agreed position on this, I'll just wait. So this is for us. This is for us. This is something that time and time again, councillors have told me they want in schemes. They want things early. Normally, they are unrealistic expectations. And of course, there are stories, you know, we've all got them over, the decades as to what hasn't quite worked. But at least having some of our money in the game means that we've got a bit more say than the status quo, which is, oh, please, Mr. or Mrs. Developer, can you provide what you said you'll provide by the time you said you'll provide it? Oh, no, you haven't done it. Okay, well, we'll just go on doing the same thing over and over again. This is meant to be a bit of a poke, a bit of a sort of an intervention to say, is there a different way of doing things? Now, who's to say it might not work, but at least we would have tried.
I'll just come into the room with any other questions and Mike online.
Yeah, a couple of points for me. Yeah, absolutely. I totally get that. So it's better for fall back on loss than give up at start. So I do welcome this and hope that it will be more effective than what we've seen in the past. A couple of specifics. on the MUF appendix paper, the local members section was blank. I'm just wondering whether we have consulted with the local members. By my reckoning, it's Castle Carey division, but I would also suggest that it has significant impact on Yeovil Central, East and West divisions as well. Important that we include those as neighbouring divisions in that as well. I'm also, I'm extremely pleased to see £8,375,955.60p in the sub fund, which is anticipated to contribute towards education provision. At what point might we expect that to be firmed up into a commitment in the future? I do meet with education colleagues around specifically the South Bridgewater allocation there. We've got planning permissions that have been granted to Victory and to Blocklock in the catchment area for North Pellerton School. But North Pellerton School will stop Sunset Bridge School, North Unit School, they're all full. And the houses, I don't want to see a position where we have houses built and no school for the children to attend. So what assurances can we have that still money will be committed in the future, please?
We'll go to Joe. What's that?
I think I might pass to Kate or Alison to answer that one, if that's okay.
I didn't think that you were going to answer the question about the consultation.
Yes, sorry, I can just answer the question about the consultation, and I can confirm that all the local members listed in the covering report were sent all documents, so they have definitely seen them.
They're not actually not listed in the appendix. That's the double check that. Thank you.
In terms of the school allocation, my understanding is that those are all ongoing discussions with education companies, but I don't know the actual timescale and when those projects are likely to come forward. Council residents, but we can follow that up and get back to you.
I would love a briefing on that. It would be good to be able to report back to my community on those issues.
Sarah?
Yeah, I don't feel sorry for developers. That's my view. I think we need to be a bit more commercial in the way we deal with them, because they're going to do that to us. So, for example, with road building, I don't know if you still do this, everyone used to ask for a bond to cover the cost of the road building. Now, we could say, couldn't we, for example, we'll have a bond for this £500,000, maybe not at the beginning, but if you haven't done it by X, because we are giving it to you in order to do this and get on with it, not to sit on the money or use it for something else, whatever. We need to be clever with them in ways that they can't get out of. So I just think we need to treat them as commercial as they will treat us, because I'm not saying these things soft touch at all, but I think they get away with things, and we have to remember that our enforcement is difficult. It is difficult always to do it. It's difficult legally, it's expensive. So the more things you've got in your toolbox to get at them without having to do your legal work, the better. So that's all I really wanted to say. I mean, I don't have a problem with this. I think it's the right way to use SIL money. It is about infrastructure. This is the sort of infrastructure we want in our areas, in our council. So I'm happy about that, but I am concerned about it being paid back. Yeah, that's my point.
I think I'm going to go to Mike before get a response, I think. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to just back up what Councillor Wakefield said in terms of bonds. Now, my understanding is that we do still require bonds on highways projects. The difficulty I've found in the past is that where, in one case, 4 or 5 years later, the highway improvement had not been undertaken, the bond was not indexed, and so it's what started out as £400,000 that we could have called upon as a council to undertake the works ourselves ended up being set against a project that was going to cost 1.4 million. I think that the number was wrong in the first place, but the lack of indexation meant that was never an option. So if we are to go down that route, we're going to have to look at indexation, which brings me on to my next question. I noticed on the slides in South Somerset, it looked as though in the period from 2017 to today, that the typical rate had gone up from £40 to £50, so a 25% increase. I noticed on the indexation for the Taunton Deane area, it had gone up from gone up almost 80% by the looks of it. And I know that was over a longer period. It was 2014 to the present day, but that was only 3 years, and doesn't cover the area when inflation was particularly high. So I was just wondering if we were using the same index, because it seems to be producing sort of quite wildly different results. Thank you.
The indexing list is based on the SIL regulations. Sorry, I couldn't hear the question very clearly, so I'm hoping I'm answering. But the SIL indexing is outlined in regulations, and it's based on the BCIS index. So you'll end up with slightly different ways in terms of its increase because of the difference of when SIL was introduced in each of the areas. I answered the question correctly. Yes.
Okay, we are kind of running. Yeah, is that legacy, Mike? Or do you want to come back?
Yes. No, that's all good. Thank you.
We are running a bit behind time, so I am going to go to recommendations. But I just wonder whether we want to consider further recommendation in relation to bonding. Sarah.
It says this funding will be fully recovered, but I just think that's a little bit optimistic. But the intention is funding will be fully recovered, and that's why I know officers will work towards that end, and I know that's what they'll put. But I just think we need to say, this indexation will be fully, or should be fully. I just don't think you can say it definitely will be. I just think they'll wriggle out of it if they can.
I think that is extra scope for them to wriggle out there if you say should, to be honest. Okay. Well, look, we've got. Let's go through the recommendations one at a time. So first of all is to maintain the SIL infrastructure priorities and spending set out in this report.
There's no case for introducing SIL in the parts of the county that don't have it. Is that all people agreed? I mean, I think they take it out faster than we did. It's just that I think
the issue is that there is a resource fund. We have to go through a full viability exercise, intervention examination, hesitating, etc. So it's a big process to introduce it. So I think we have to put it in our plan work program at this stage, because we're not focused on the best of the level something I'm sharing about in a minute. And then we would be looking after that to see whether or not we would introduce them elsewhere. Obviously based on what the government will do, because it makes the proposals on infrastructure and infrastructure.
Are we going to split this up or do this as a block? Sorry.
Everyone will screen the samples.
So, the first one was to maintain the SIL infrastructure priorities set out in this report. Do we have a proposer? Okay, we'll agree on that. Secondly, is that should the planning permission be granted to use community infrastructure levy SIL funding over the period of 2026 to 2036 to provide cash flow to forward fund infrastructure to support the Upmudwood Yeovil sustainable urban extension. This funding will be recovered from the development via its S106.
Well, just to say, I think we should just change the wording so it says after Yeovil sustainable urban on the basis that this funding will be given. Because that's the intention. I mean, that's just a bit.
We got that draft for your amendments.
On the basis that this funding.
I think that clarifies the meaning of what I think is intended in the wording there.
I think that's just to an extent.
Okay, so Sarah?
Yeah.
Bill to separate. All those in favour? Okay, and lastly, the agreement for funding 500,000 of walking and cycling infrastructure, secondary access and associated infrastructure at Mudford Yeovil Sustainable Urban Extension was delegated to the Chief Planning Officer and Service Director for Infrastructure and Transport in consultation with Head of Legal Services. Those are the second there. Okay. That's apologies for taking a bit longer than proposed, but I think it was important that we had a good airing on that. So I'm going to the local plan 6 monthly update report, and I'm going to invite Laura Higgins to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Laura Higgins. I'm a Principal Planning Policy Officer in the Planning Policy team, working on the local plan. The report starts on page 41 of your report pack. And this report is for information purposes. There's no decision being sought from this report. It's to provide an update on the progress of the local plan. So the first key pieces of work that we've been carrying on with over the last 6 months or so has been evidence-based gathering. This is the critical first stage in the local plan. We can't really move on with much else without doing some of this key work at the beginning of the local plan process. The ones that we've been progressing with are the economic development needs assessment, and this sets out a forecasting for our employment land needs over the next 40 years. Now, we've employed Hardesty Jones Associates to do this with us. It's in progress at the moment, and we are also working closely with our economic development team to develop this piece of work as well. And in the process of the economic development team producing the economic strategy, we're ensuring we're linked across with the objectives of both documents. So we're expecting the economic development needs assessment later in the year to coordinate with the production of the economic strategy, so they are aligned. The local housing needs assessment sets out a housing need over the next 20 years. It's very much defined by the guidance from the government in terms of the methodology for working out housing need, but it also goes further and looks at more specific specialist housing need, such as affordable housing and housing for older people persons. Now, there has been a delay to this piece of work because of the consultation on the National Planning Policy Framework, which came out over the summer, which is consulting on changing the standard methodology for housing need calculations. So we've paused work on the housing needs assessment until we know the final outcome of that consultation. Otherwise, it would be time wasted using the old methodology. But we're still expecting, depending on when we get the outcome of the NPPF consultation, that's supposed to be later this year. So we'll be able to progress on very quickly after that, because the report is in its form. It just needs to get the new data being added into it. The strategic flood risk assessment is something else that needs to be done at an early stage of local plan development, so we understand our flood risk across the whole of Somerset. This one we're working with Exmoor National Park Authority on. That's anticipated for a first stage towards the end of this year, next month, I think, but then updating once we've got some new data that's coming in from the National Flood Risk Assessment data set being available next year. The Gypsy Travellers and Travelling Show People Accommodation Assessment, that's expected in October this year. That's all running to schedule. So that's something that will help inform our policies as well. We've just started work on the landscape character assessment due March next year. That's land use consultant producing that with us. And then we've got some internally produced documents as well. The first key one is the role and function of settlement study. This is a really interesting piece of work, which we will be discussing with members in due course. It's at the moment we have a hierarchy of settlements across different former local plan areas within Somerset, all approaching things in slightly different ways, how you can classify different sizes of settlements, whether they're primary centres or market centres or large villages, with different terminology across the whole of Somerset. So this aims to bring all that together and align the naming of different types of settlements, bringing lots of different data from what's in settlement to employment data and things like that. So it's a big piece of work and it's quite challenging, but it's something we're going to members to discuss in a draft form. So that's expected later this year. Town centre health checks are ongoing and they are basically quite prescribed by government what we need to do in those, and that's a series of data collection activities. And then finally, at the moment, sustainability proposal scoping report. This assesses the scope of the impact of the local plan and sustainability measures, which is a key statutory and legal requirement for us to do for the local plan. So those are the current pieces of evidence-based work that are ongoing. Each of them they're all sort of big documents in themselves, and they take quite a long time, can be impacted by government consultations or the availability of data set, but they are ongoing and generally on schedule. Then I've summarised the consultation and engagement activities we'll be doing soon. We'll be bringing an engagement strategy to members to this subcommittee to discuss how we're going to engage with from the members of the public, with different stakeholders. We will be undertaking a call for sites, which is mainly an engagement with landowners and site promoters. This will then we will be asking for sites to be promoted to us for us to consider in the local plan. We're doing an all-member launch, a member briefing, which is happening on this Thursday, to present the information in this document and then answer any questions people have. And also just to mention as well, we're doing a lot of internal consultation because we are a big authority at the moment with lots of different service areas, all with progressing their own strategies, but we're finding ways to actually make sure we're all aligned. So one of those is the planning and transport economic climate policy group. So we're regularly meeting to understand what we're working on. But we're also bringing in other service areas like housing as well, and those kind of working group level discussions. And we've also just set up creating communities working group. We've had the first meeting already, which was very positively received. I think it was very productive. And that's for heads of service level to discuss strategies and emerging strategy drafts and outcomes, different policy approaches, just to make sure we are all aligned on that as well. We're also required to undertake duty to cooperate. It's being discussed at the moment with the NPPF consultation about how we do this. Going forward, it's likely to be even more focused on strategic development. But as Somerset Council, we are a strategic area anyway. But we've started these discussions with neighbouring parties like Exmoor, and we will continue to do so. And then finally, just to update you on the digital improvements, which we're hopefully going to speed up our site assessment process, where we've got some government funding to develop a case making tool to purchase it. And this will help significantly speed up the assessment of the many sites that we're going to be receiving sites. I mean, we're anticipating we may well get, around 1,000 sites being submitted to us. So it's hopefully going to speed up that process. And next steps, we will be progressing for more evidence-based studies like the next round, benefit study, retail leisure needs, employment land review, habitat regulations assessment, possibly transport constraints as well. So that's somewhere where we are at the moment. Any questions?
Okay, really impressive amount of work that you're having to bring together. And I think that is where, and all sort of appearing at different times. And I think that's the difficulty you probably have is landing them all into one area and the work you're doing to actually
bring it together is quite interesting. I'll ask those questions.
I'm very pleased to hear this. I'm sure I probably something I probably should have known a bit more about what was going on anyway. We have had some updates, but I'm getting asked at the parish councils a lot. My parishes are on the edge of Thornton, in Jordan, they're all very worried about what's going to happen to their land and if anything's going to happen. So they do want to know about the call for site, which you say is later in 24. So can I say that to people that we're hoping to do that by the end of the year, or
yes,
just so that
yes,
people know that that's coming along, and I can give I could certainly on this basis give a bit of an update of what's because it's what's happening, and when is the new local plan coming? They all want to know that. So it's really helpful to have this. It would be helpful, I think, to, if you don't already do this, you probably do, just a short paragraph, just a paragraph to parish clerks, because they do want to know where we are with it. It is a thing that they all worry about, because they all comment on planning, so all parish councils are very excited about it, and they all think actually they should make all the decisions, which you probably know. So that would be really helpful, something just really short, just saying we've done this, or we're doing this, and we're going to do the call for sites. And then they would all know, and they wouldn't keep asking me.
We are meeting with the parish clerks Thursday. So next Thursday. So at their regular meeting that they have with the
but they don't all come to that.
I don't know.
We also send out planning newsletters, which they should all be signed up to, where we provide on a regular basis updates on what's happening in planning policy more generally. So that's the best place for them to get updates.
Well, I'll do it in my updates to my parish council, because I think it's important they know, and that they stop asking me.
Well, the meeting next Thursday, I'll be presenting this sort of information. So a bit more information than they might get in some of the the newsletters, but hopefully they'll find that useful.
And when you say it's coming Thursday,
I think it's next 16th, yeah.
It's Wednesday, yeah. It's Wednesday.
Can I just put an ask in there? When stuff is presented to parish councils, it is absolutely vital that the same information goes to the local councillors either before or at least at the same time, so that the local councillors understand exactly what's being told to the parish councillors, and then there could be no ambiguity between the two, which has been a bit of an issue across Somerset Council, I believe, that we're trying to address.
Chair, we have got a briefing session with all members this Thursday evening.
I think
provide this information.
Absolutely, I understand that, but I think it needs to be emailed to each of the councillors too, because people miss things, and if it's there can be no ambiguity. If information isn't going to.
I would respectfully suggest that these briefings are recorded.
Yeah.
And that it's for members to ensure that they are updated and briefed. Yes, we can do it in multiple ways, but there just comes a point of we don't do it with semaphore or the medium of interpretive dance as well. We do need to be able to say there is a briefing, you can log on at the time, or you can watch it later. I think that is perfectly reasonable to ask for additional information. Sort of media, I think, is overriding the cake. I think members should be able to go back and look at that recording if they're unable to make that briefing.
Okay, just for us to note, we need to note the report.
So I can just ask you a proper public health, just information. So there will be more reports. So I'm looking on public health and to local plan as well. So I'm looking at health development, impact assessment, and having it fit into the local plan, future planning, using a series of talking papers, which is looking at public health issues and how they can be incorporated into the local plan reforms and working with the core.
You read the report? Okay, moving on to forward plan. And I'm going to invite Alison to introduce the forward plan and the agenda plan.
So, Chair, you'll see on the forward plan for December is the opening of the plan
That is still provisional, because I don't believe we've yet got availability, examination referendum conclusion. The local transport plan, which is currently on the warrant plan for December, needs to move, I understand, to February. I think that's because of delays in the government advice, but Sam may want to kind of come in and support.
Thanks, Alison. Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to explain, we're waiting the outcome of the budget at the end of October to understand any implications for the local transport plan, and timeframes around, updating the plan and then reporting documents mean that we need to push the plan to come to the February meeting rather than the December meeting. So apologies for the delay in that.
And there was mention earlier of the consultation and engagement strategies that need to go into the plan. That's it for the moment.
Right. Okay, so we need to put that onto the forward plan. What? Gosh. And it's just any questions?
So does that mean that in the December meeting, we've got the opening? No, I'm not sure about the opening.
We aren't, but the consultation and engagement strategy potentially as well.
Okay.
Okay. No other questions? In that case, I'll ask committee to note forward plan.
I've missed out one thing which is gone to the February, is the short waterways guidance following the consultation needs to go on for the February.
Just answer it. So could we have a little section in these meetings of an update on things like decisions we make? Because I didn't know about what had happened with the money for the road to the railway station. It'd be nice if somebody had just reported that we've got the rent planning application, whatever it's happened. I mean, I try to follow it all, but I can't. But the things that we've made decisions about would just be nice to have a little update about where they've got to or haven't. Including the monthly upload sort of thing.
Response.
We could do that from the maximising from the minutes of the last meeting. Yeah, just take it up through that.
Yeah, just be useful to have that.
Okay, that's matters arising. Would be handy. So I'm just going to ask committee to note the forward plan. Okay, and that brings the meeting to an end.